Hi, I'm Tracy, VE3TWM. Thank you for tuning in to Outdoors on the Air. Okay, it's, what is it, about 10 to 10 on Friday morning. I've literally just arrived at the campsite. This is the weekend of the CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest. It is October 2022, the 28th I believe, and it's time to survey the site. It's apparently, according to the listing on the park's website, it's something like 22 meters long, which, you know, roughly multiply that by 3 to give you about, I don't know, let's call it 70 feet long by 8 meters wide, and that is what, about 24 feet or so. It's uneven. The pad slope, they call it on the park's website, has a rating for slope, and it's called uneven. So it definitely has a lot of variation. I've got 2 large shelters with me today that I'm bringing for the weekend. I've got my 5-man tent. I've also brought along a camping, almost like a cooking shelter type thing, which is new to my collection. I'm really looking forward to giving it a try. The plan is that I'll be setting up that shelter with my station inside, and I'll just be dedicating the 5-man tent for my cot, and that'll be where I sleep. So I'm going to do a walk around of the site and sort of try to figure out where I'm going to put an antenna. What I'd like to do is I'd like to end up with an 80 through 10 meter off-center fed or an end fed antenna. I haven't quite made up my mind. I've brought both variations with me. I've also got a couple of 40 meter alternates if the 80 can't work, but I think I'm going to be able to squeeze an 80 in here, which will give me a little bit more flexibility during the contest. Okay, let's do a walk around of the site. Okay, I'm going in handheld mode. I'm going to go very slowly here. So yes, the campsite is narrow, particularly through this spot right here. I'm literally standing just behind my car where I've just backed the car into the site. So that part is obviously dedicated for use of the car only. Narrows, and then as I come through this little passage here, it widens up. Now that is Lake Ontario, you can see in the background there. I am literally, well, there's a small pathway, and then right across that pathway is a little bit of brush, and then there's a stone beach. But you might be able to hear the surf. It's a great lake. It's a big piece of water. I don't know if we can rightfully call it surf, but you can certainly hear the waves crashing up on the shore. The waves are pretty good today. Although it's not too windy. I'm really happy about that. Okay, so now I'm just coming through here, and you can see the site is opening up a little bit. You can notice that there are some trees. I've got some stuff that I can toss a line up into to anchor one end of the wire antenna. It looks like I'll be going with a north-south, roughly speaking, orientation. That's where the ends will be, which means broadside to that. East and west is where I'll be able to communicate most effectively on the bands I end up working. And so now it's just a question of, okay, I figure I'm going to spend the next couple of hours erecting my shelter, getting everything set up, my cot inside the tent, the little table, etc. The shelter set up with the cooking shelter set up with my station inside. I'm giving myself a couple of hours. It may take longer than that, but I've got to figure out where I'm going to put each one. And I need a fairly flat surface, most importantly, for the sleeping shelter. At least I think I do. But I'm going to give this a little bit more thought. There's quite a slope. You can see the stump in the middle there. there's quite a slope down, from the tree in the back down towards the picnic table, and then again on the right-hand side, you'll see a couple of trees and a stump there. It sort of slopes down again towards the stump, and it all sort of ends up in a big depression. Well, I'm calling it a big depression. It's not a big depression, but if we got a lot of rain, and by the way, the forecast is excellent for this weekend. Cold, but excellent. I don't know if I mentioned this, but it's about 5 degrees Celsius right now, which is about 42 Fahrenheit, so a little bit nippy, and daytime temperature is supposed to get up around 11 or 12 degrees Celsius, so it's going to warm up a little bit. Still be a cool weekend for sure. Otherwise, no precipitation in the forecast. I guess I'm going to have to move that picnic table out of the way. I don't think I'll be using it because I've got a table for the station that I've packed. But let me put some more thought into this, and I'll come back to you once I've got the shelters set up. Okay, well, I made a decision at the line of scrimmage here as I was setting up the shelters. I reasoned that the flatter surface provided me over this direction would be much better for the sleeping tent. Good night's sleep is really important. So I have the cooking shelter set up over here. No, it's on a slope. It sort of slopes from the near side downwards, and I'll show you a little bit of that in a minute. But I just figured, I can deal with the slope when I'm operating, but better to have that than when I'm trying to sleep. And that's okay. It all works out. If I want to have a fire tonight and it's still up in the air, then the fire pit is also clear from really close proximity of the tents, which is something else I was considering. Okay, my next step, actually, let me show you the inside of the tent so far, the cooking tent so far, which is going to be my command post, if you will, for the contest. Okay, it is a horrible mess in there right now. I'm just setting things up, had to find out where my antennas were and get all my stuff kind of laid out. I've got my DX wire 50-foot mast I'm going to be putting up. Here's the other thing that played into positioning of the shelters. I needed to have some space pretty much in the center of the campsite for that 50-foot mast. And then I'm very fortunate this campsite doesn't have overhead cover in the center. It's wide open up there, so that's really going to help. The idea here is an 80 through 10. I decided I'm going to go with the high-end fed, and I'm going to support the mid of that antenna, approximate mid, with the 50-foot mast, probably tying it off somewhere around the 40-foot mark, and then having it as an inverted V with the ends sloping down. I'll put paracord on either end, and then just either wrap them around a tree or anchor them into ground with a peg. But I'm pretty sure I've got enough room, I've got enough brush to either side of the campsite that I'm going to be able to get that 80-meter antenna up, which is really cool because there's interesting stuff happening on 80. There might not be a lot of contest activity, but there should be the opportunity for me to make some contacts, maybe with nets and that sort of thing, just to give my signal a little bit of a check as I get things set up. So it's, and by the way, setting up those shelters earlier took me about 2 hours in total. This one took me an hour full, but it's the first time I've ever set it up, and the instructions were all that IKEA style stuff where it's just photos and you have to try to interpret those. So it took me a little while to figure that out. But it's up. It seems to be in really good shape for one that was on clearance and had been previously used. I think it was used once, the lady at the store told me, so it seems to be in good shape. That's it for now. Let me work on getting an antenna set up. You know what, I may actually show you the antenna before I get to that stage, so come back to you in just a moment. Okay, here is the high-end fed Field Day antenna. I don't even know if Ron at High End Company is making these anymore, but it's worked well for me in the past, and I'm looking forward to giving it a shot. Actually, take a look here. Oh boy, that's interesting. I'd forgotten it has a BNC connector on it. I'm gonna have to dig through my box and see if I've got a BNC to SO or PL259 adapter. Not sure that I do. Okay, there's an important lesson to be learned again. I brought along the high-end Fed, and by the way, I brought 4 antennas along, I think, today for today's activity. So I've got backup plans after backup plans, but I didn't bring the BNC to SO239 connector, so I am out of luck as far as using the high-end Fed. Note to yourself, always bring that kind of stuff, and I forgot it. But I've got backup plans, and here we go. I've got the N9 SAB. This is an off-center Fed antenna. Now, I plan on running the contest with an FT-817, which of course does not have a built-in tuner. Fortunately, I brought along a tuner for the FT-817. I'm not a huge fan of using tuners with the FT-817, but in this case, I wanted to test out the tuner because I haven't used it in the field before, and that'll work just fine with this particular antenna. It'll mean I'm radiating less power, but it is what it is. So I'm going to set up my pole mount and the DX wire and get the half or the midway point elevated and tie off the ends and come back to you. Okay, it is now 4:08, and yeah, it's taken me a while. I did have a Zoom call actually a FaceTime call with my brother. He's a camper but couldn't come out this weekend. Yes, we caught up a bit, but the mast, the 50-foot DX wire mast, is now up. The N9 SAB 100 watt 80 through 6, I think it's 6, off-center Fed is now up. Here's another look at the DX wire mast with the line coming off towards the south, and I'll spin the camera around a sec and show you the path as it heads off to where it needs to go. Okay, you might be able to see a bit of reflection off the wire against the trunk of that tree towards the center of the frame. The end of the wire actually leads over a pathway, a public pathway that they've got along the lakeside, and it is anchored. The other far end of the antenna has some paracord tied to it, and the paracord is tied off to a tree on the other side of the path. The end of the radial in that direction is up about 20 feet. So 40 feet in the center, 20 feet on the ends. Now we get to see how it works. This year I've added a couple of elements to my portable station. The first one is the one you can see behind me, which is the shelter. This is the chow house shelter, and so far so good. It took me a while to set up, but you know what, it seems to be doing the trick so far. And the second one is I've got a portable Big Buddy heater, which sounds like glamping, and I guess in some way it is, but I gave it a trial run last night. And let me tell you, with this 10 by, I think it might be a 12 by 12 or something shelter inside, with it zipped up, with just a crack open in one of the doors to let oxygen in and out, as you're supposed to do with gas heaters, within 5 minutes there was a significant change in the inside temperature, such that I was able to take my coat off. So that was a big thumbs up, and that's going to make the operation a little bit more pleasant for me tonight. Speaking of tonight, there are a number of bands that are open. I'm seeing activity. It's now what? It's a little about 4:30, 4:43, I guess, Eastern time in the afternoon. So I'm going to settle in and start some operating, see how I can do with my Flea Power 5-watt signal up against all the kilowatts out there, and there are a bunch of them. So fingers crossed, and let's see how I do. But first, before I get into the action, I just show you what I've got going on the operating desk. Okay. Those of you who are ardent followers of my channel may know that I bought my Yaesu FT-817ND back off the fellow that I sold it to a couple of years ago. And when I bought it back off him, he had added a couple of accessories, a couple of options. Number one was the soda beams. This is a compressor for the microphone. I've never worked with one of these before. I've heard good things about them, but let's see how it goes. Also, take a look in this plastic bag. Here's something I never would have purchased if it had been up to me. But he had, and he included it as part of the package. This is one of those Chinese QRP amplifiers. It is, I think, the MX P50M. So I've never used it. I figured I'd bring it along this time if there's any kind of issue getting through with my QRP signal, then I could always press it into service. And look for more of that amplifier in an upcoming video. Also over here, I'd like to call your attention to the power supply I'm using. I'm going to see how much time I get out of this one. This is made by a company called Talent Cell. You can buy them on Amazon. This particular one is a 6-hour, and what's particularly notable to me about this is that Cliff, the QRP school. Cliff, I've forgotten your call sign if you're watching this. I hope you're well. I haven't seen you producing any videos for a while. Hope everything's okay. And you're a guy I'd love to have on my live stream if we can ever arrange for it, if you're up to it. But this is a 6 amp hour. I want to see how much time I get out of that 6 amp hour. This cost about $60, and that's Canadian dollars, and cost about $60, and compact. Let's see how it works out. I know a lot of these Chinese batteries, they have a rated amp hour, and the reality is quite different. So it could be well short of that, but nonetheless, it's worth a try. So there's this, of course. I forgot to mention the Yaesu FT-817ND. Let me just turn this off, and I'll show you. So on the back, I've installed the wind camp Anderson power pole connector, and I've also got these peg leg feet that are installed to angle the rig upright. Other than that, it's pretty. Oh, here's something else. So the power cord that Yaesu ships with the FT-817 does not have a fuse. So I found some 2.5 amp fuse cables, and I just put those in line with the power for the 817. So now the 817 is completely protected. And look at this. In my haste to assemble the station, I've got 2 of those on there. I only need 1, but 2 are on there. I know that's not double protection, but regardless, I'll have to remove one before I start up. But I've talked on long enough. Let's see what the bands are like and if I can make any contacts. Victor Echo 3 Tango Whiskey Mike. Holy crow. Okay, now all of a sudden. So I had done some preliminary testing before shooting that last little clip, and the SWR appeared flat. Now I'm using an off-center fed antenna, and off-center fed antennas typically require a tuner off the band that they're primarily designed for, and the one that's being used today is 80 meters. So here I am up on 10 meters, and the SWR was fine when I tried a test earlier, but now it's very high. So what I've done is I've added in the LDG Z817 tuner. I've never used one of these in the field with the 817 before. This is another item that came along with the package with the 817ND, where I repurchased my old rig back. So it's going to be interesting to see how this works out. Not a huge fan of using tuners with the 817, but I knew this going in that because I would be using an off-center fed, that I would need to use a tuner. So, and I also wanted to stretch the legs on the tuner and just see how it does work. So let's get at it and see if I can make any contacts.
Thanks. Zulu Fox 2 Alpha Alpha.
Victor Echo 3 Tango Whiskey Mike.
Alpha Victor Echo 3.
Victor Echo 3 Tango Whiskey Mike.
Victor Echo 3 Tango Whiskey. Mike, what are the chances of that? 598?
Copy the 598. Please copy 5904.
Thanks. Zulu Fox 2 Alpha Alpha. K7 Alpha.
Just made a contact with that Zulu Foxtrot station, but I wanted to give you a tip regarding, and by the way, the ground is not level. This is the most level piece of site I could find on the campsite for this shelter, and it's not level, so I'm looking like I'm in an old Batman TV series episode. So when you're using a radio like the FT-817, which isn't very sophisticated in terms of selectivity. Now, and by the way, I have a Collins 2 kilohertz filter installed in the 817, but that's not enough in a situation like this where you've got all kinds of high power stations. They're kind of crammed together. So I've got that going, and by the way, I've managed to do this in previous contests without having that Collins filter, so you don't necessarily need it. But turn the RF gain down to make sure that your IPO is off on all Yaesu rigs. The IPO, when it's you make sure the IPO is on, because when you turn the IPO on, what you're doing is turning off the preamplifier, and you want to make the receiver less sensitive, because when it's less sensitive, you're less likely to hear the bleed over from nearby stations. Now you may say to yourself, hey, but if I turn that sensitivity down, doesn't that mean I'm not going to hear the stations I want to communicate with? Well, if you're doing like I'm doing, so you're working a big contest, you're running low power, you got a good antenna, you're gonna try for those stations that you're hearing the strongest, because that means there's a bit of a pipeline between you and them. Who cares about the little wee stations you can't hear? Because you're just going to have a devil of a time trying to make contacts with them. Now, I understand there might be some rare DX that you want to work, and he's really weak. Go after him, by all means. All I'm saying is, for most of your contacts, turn down that RF gain to reduce the interaction from the neighboring stations, and you're going to have more success making contacts. So that's exactly what I'm doing here.
CQ Contest, Lima, Whiskey 4, Eco, Florida Contest, CQ Contest.
Victor Echo 3, Tango, Whiskey, Mexico.
Victor Echo 3, Tango, Whiskey, Mexico.
QSL.
Okay, 5913.
5904.
04, thank you, Lima, Whiskey 4, Eco, Florida Contest.
Victor Echo 3, Tango, Whiskey, Mike.
Victor Echo 2.
Victor Echo 3, Tango, Whiskey, Mike.
Victor Echo 3, Tango, Whiskey, Mike, 5913.
5904.
Thank you, Lima United 7, Yankee Zulu Contest. CQ Contest, Lima, Uniform 3, Delta Kilo.
Victor Echo 3, Tango, Whiskey, Mike.
Victor Echo 3, Tango, Whiskey, Mike, 5913.
5904.
Thank you, Lima, Uniform 3, Delta Kilo. Thank you, Papa Japan 2, Tango.
Victor Echo 3, Tango, Whiskey, Mike.
Is there a Victor Echo with the whiskey?
Victor Echo 3, Tango, Whiskey, Mike.
Time, we have E3 Tango, Whiskey, Mexico, 599.
5904.
Thank you for your patience, Papa Japan 2, Tango.
Victor Echo 3, Tango, Whiskey, Mike.
Victor Echo 3, Tango.
Victor Echo 3, Tango, Whiskey, Mike.
Victor Echo 3, Tango, Whiskey, 9,
5904.
Number 4, thank you, Alphonse, yourself, Whiskey, Papa 3, Echo.
What you don't see in this video is that in the hours leading up to my getting on the air, I got a migraine headache. As a result, I only lasted about an hour on the air before I just couldn't stand it anymore. In that hour, I worked from South America to Alaska and many places in between. The 5 extra strength Advils I had taken throughout the day couldn't break the discomfort wall. I didn't get to fully test either the speech compressor, the tuner, or even hook up the amplifier. Those will remain on my project list for future videos. Despite that, I consider my effort a success. The message I'd most like to impart is that operating QRP SSB during a big contest does not have to be an exercise in frustration. In this activation, QRP was not a limitation for me. Plain old poor health was. I would have happily made many more contacts into the evening had the headache not intervened. The story is the same as it has ever been. Pair up a QRP transceiver with a full-sized wire antenna up at a good height, and you'll make contacts. Even if your gear is not state-of-the-art, if you practice good operating techniques, you can squeeze every last drop of capability out of that rig and have success. So why not move beyond parks on the air and into the big leagues of HF contesting when you go portable? The experience you'll get will teach you lessons and make you a better operator. If you've ever operated from the field in a big contest, leave a comment below and tell us how it went. That's all for this time. Thank you for watching. Now it's your turn. Get out of the shack, get outdoors, and get on the air. 7-3 from Tracy, VE3 TWM.